Steel Magnolias makes the audience think they're about to watch a gentle movie about a group of Southern women sitting in a beauty salon, gossiping, joking around, and sharing family stories. And the film absolutely has all of that. It has sharp, charming dialogue, a pink wedding dress, laughter, and women teasing each other with lines as sharp as a razor but still full of affection. But that is only the surface. Because the deeper you go into this story, the more you realize Steel Magnolias was not born from pure imagination. It was written out of a real loss. Behind Shelby was a real woman who truly died from complications related to diabetes. Behind Sally Field's tears was a real mother who had to bury her daughter. And behind the hospital scenes were real people who had witnessed that tragedy with their own eyes. This is not just a movie about friendship. It is a story about women, loss, and the way people try to keep living after their hearts have already been broken. Number 1. Shelby was not entirely a fictional character. The most important thing to know is that Steel Magnolias did not begin as a Hollywood movie idea. It began with Susan Harling Robinson, the sister of writer Robert Harling. Susan had type 1 diabetes. Doctors had made it very clear that pregnancy could put her in serious danger, but she still wanted to have a child. She gave birth to a baby boy, and not long afterward, she died from complications of the disease. That is the backbone of Shelby's story in the film. So the arguments between Shelby and her mother were not the kind of conflict invented for drama. They came from what the Harling family really went through. The mother's fear was real. The daughter's stubbornness was real too. And the final tragedy was not a screenwriter's twist. It was a real loss that had already happened before the movie ever existed. Once you know that, you see Steel Magnolias differently. The film is not trying to perform pain. It brings real pain to the screen from its very foundation. Number 2. Robert Harling wrote the play in just 10 days. After Susan died, Robert Harling did not sit down to write a work of art in the usual sense. He wrote because he was afraid of one very specific thing. Susan's son was still so young, and one day, that little boy might not remember who his mother had been. A friend told Harling to write everything down. At first, he tried doing it as prose. But very quickly, he realized the Southern women in his family could not live inside a few short paragraphs. They had to talk. They had to interrupt each other, gossip, argue, joke around, and then suddenly hug each other and cry. So he switched and wrote it as a play. He wrote it straight through in about 10 days. Not because he was trying to beat a deadline, but because he was trying to hold on to the memory of his sister before grief shattered everything into pieces too small to hold. He said very clearly that he wrote the play so his nephew would one day know what his mother had been like. That is why the dialogue in Steel Magnolias feels so alive. It did not come from a screenwriting manual. It came from family memory. But that still was not the most painful part of the story. The most painful part came when the movie started shooting, and Susan's real-life mother decided to walk in and watch it all with her own eyes. Number 3. Susan's mother came to the set just to see Julia Roberts stand up again. When the crew filmed the scene where Shelby is taken off life support, Robert Harling did not want his mother there. He understood too well how cruel that experience would be. It is one thing to reread the play. It is another to sit there and watch a young actress recreate your daughter's final moments in front of dozens of people under bright lights and cameras. But she came anyway. She sat there and watched the whole scene. Afterward, Harling asked her why she would put herself through something like that. Her answer was devastating. "I wanted to see Julia get up and walk away." That one sentence explains everything. In real life, she never got to see Susan rise after that moment. But on a movie set, at least she could sit there, wait for the director to call cut, and then watch the young woman playing her daughter open her eyes, get out of the hospital bed, walk away, and still be alive. This is not beautiful in some romantic way. It is the way a mother gave herself one moment real life had refused her. And it shows just how private, painful, and real this movie truly was. Number 4. They even brought in the real nurse who had removed Susan's life support. If the last fact was already heavy enough, this one is even harder to believe. To make the hospital scenes feel authentic, The production invited real medical staff who had cared for Susan Robinson to appear in the film, and among them was the nurse who had actually been there during Susan's final moments. In other words, the film did not just recreate a real tragedy. It pulled the very people who had lived through it back into almost the same experience again. Robert Harling said that gave the movie a level of truth no one could fake. He was right. There are some emotions that cannot be built with makeup or music. Only when someone who once stood in that room steps back into the frame does the audience unconsciously feel the real weight of it. But this fact also makes something else very clear. Steel Magnolias was not made from a safe emotional distance. It was made very close to the Harling family's painful memories. Close enough that, at times, the line between cinema and real life nearly disappeared. Number 5. Robert Harling even played the minister at both Shelby's wedding and funeral. This is a very unusual and deeply moving detail. When the play was turned into a film, director Herbert Ross invited Robert Harling himself to appear in the movie as the minister. That means Harling, the man who had lost his sister in real life, stepped into the frame to preside over the two biggest ceremonies in her fictional life, her wedding and her funeral. At the beginning of the film, he is the one watching Shelby enter marriage. At the end, he is there to send her off for the last time. And if you really stop and think about that, it is an incredibly heavy experience for the writer. Harling did not just retell his sister's story through the script, he placed himself inside that story too. Maybe that is why Steel Magnolias feels so different from many other tragic films. It was not just written by someone who understood pain. It was written by someone still carrying that pain and willing to walk straight back into it. By this point, the audience can see clearly why the movie was never as light as it looks on the surface. Under the funny dialogue is a story built from real memories, real people, and real loss. Number 6. Julia Roberts was not the first choice for Shelby. Looking back now, a lot of people assume Shelby obviously belonged to Julia Roberts, but at the time of casting, that was far from certain. Daryl Hannah had been considered for the role first. Meg Ryan was once attached and then dropped out. Winona Ryder was discussed, but she was considered too young. Laura Dern's name was also in the mix. That shows how hard Shelby was to cast. The role did not just require someone beautiful and appealing on screen. She also had to feel strong and fragile at the same time, and she needed enough charm that both the audience and the other characters would genuinely love her. Only then would the tragedy really hurt. Julia Roberts was not a superstar yet. She had only recently started getting attention after Mystic Pizza and was still very new. But when she walked into the audition room, she had something hard to replace: life. A warm, bright, very natural energy. That is what made Shelby feel like a real person living in that town, not just a character written to make the audience cry. But getting cast was still not the whole story. What made the Harling family believe Julia was the right person happened later, inside their own home. Number 7. Julia Roberts sat and listened as the Harling family talked about Susan. After she got the role, Julia Roberts did not just memorize lines and show up on set. She chose to spend time with the Harling family so she could understand what Susan had really been like. She met Robert Harling's parents and listened as they talked about his sister, her personality, the energy she brought into the house, and the effect she had on the people around her. That was a very important step. Roberts could not build Shelby from words on a page alone. She needed to know how Susan had actually made her family feel. Harling later said that when Julia walked into the house, the whole atmosphere changed. Not because she looked like Susan, but because she brought in a similar brightness. Once you hear that, you understand why Shelby never feels like she is being played as the pretty girl with a tragic story. Julia Roberts tried to pull a real warmth out of the Harling family's memory, and that is exactly what makes Shelby so lovable. Number 8. Julia Roberts and Dylan McDermott got engaged in real life. One of the better-known behind-the-scenes facts is that Julia Roberts and Dylan McDermott, who played Shelby's husband in the film, fell in love in real life and got engaged after the movie wrapped. It is the kind of thing that happens in Hollywood a lot. Two young actors play husband and wife, spend a long time working closely together, live inside a highly emotional atmosphere, and the relationship on screen starts drifting into real life. The relationship was real, but it did not last. They broke up not long afterward, right as Julia Roberts' career was starting to explode. This fact is not as painful as the stories about Susan, but it does reveal something familiar about projects like this. When a cast spends too long living inside the emotions of a story, sometimes the boundary between work and real life starts to blur. To audiences, they were a couple in the movie. In real life, that almost became true too. But in the end, it was only one short chapter in the many things Steel Magnolias changed in Julia Roberts' life. Number 9. Herbert Ross was so difficult that the cast had to step in and protect Julia. This movie tells a story about friendship and women taking care of one another. What makes that even more remarkable is that the same thing really happened off-screen. Herbert Ross had a reputation for being extremely difficult. During the making of Steel Magnolias, he put particular pressure on Julia Roberts, who was the youngest member of the cast and the most vulnerable. Sally Field later said that Ross criticized Roberts so relentlessly that she ended up crying. He pushed her very hard, sometimes beyond what the job really required. But Roberts did not go through that alone. Veteran actresses like Sally Field, Shirley MacLaine, Olympia Dukakis, and Dolly Parton all saw what was happening. They stood up for her. They spoke directly to Ross when they felt he was going too far. Put simply, the older women on that set protected the youngest woman from being crushed by the pressure. That makes the sisterhood in the movie feel even more real. Because off-camera, they were doing exactly what the film is about. When someone weaker is being hurt, the others step in and shield her. But even that was not the hardest thing the cast had to face. Their heaviest burden came when the film moved into its most painful scenes. Number 10. Sally Field deliberately wrecked her own voice. Sally Field did not approach Malin as if the emotion would simply appear on its own. When it came time for the funeral scene, she prepared in a very intense way. She screamed into a pillow for hours to make her voice raw, tired, and cracked. Her reason was simple. She did not want Malin's crying to sound like crying that had been performed. She wanted it to sound like the voice of a woman who had cried too much, spoken too much, and by that point could barely control her breathing anymore. It was a very practical choice, and it worked. By the time the scene began, her voice already carried the feeling of being worn down. So when Malin cries out, "Why?" in pain, it does not feel theatrical. It feels like the sound of a real mother collapsing. A lot of people remember that scene because of the dialogue. But if you listen closely, the thing that hits hardest is the sound. Sally Field's voice sounds like it is tearing apart layer by layer. And that was not luck. She prepared for it to happen exactly that way. That was the point when the cast and crew began to understand they were not just making an emotional film. They were touching something too real, something that required actors to go very close to real pain if the scene was going to carry the weight everyone wanted. Number 11. No one wanted to ask Sally Field to do the funeral scene again. Shelby's funeral scene is one of the most famous scenes in the movie. It is the moment audiences almost always mention when they talk about Steel Magnolias. Partly because the dialogue is so strong, but even more because Sally Field's emotion is so overwhelming. According to the people who were there, the largest emotional break in Malin's grief was essentially captured from one major eruption of feeling. When Field reached that highest point of pain, the set went silent. No one wanted to interrupt. No one wanted to break the moment. Herbert Ross, who was known for being difficult, understood that if he cut in at the wrong moment, he might never get that same emotional energy back again. When the scene ended, the atmosphere on set was heavy. Not in the sense that everyone applauded because they had just seen a great performance, but in the sense that everyone knew they had witnessed something too real and did not quite know how to respond. That is one of the reasons the scene has lasted. It was not just acted well, it was allowed to happen fully. Number 12. Dolly Parton and Daryl Hannah really had to learn how to do hair. Because so much of the film takes place in Truvy's beauty salon, Herbert Ross would not accept fake scissor holding and pretend salon work. He wanted every movement in that shop to feel real. That led to one very fun detail. Dolly Parton and Daryl Hannah had to be trained by professional hairstylists. They learned how to use scissors, brush hair, spray product, style hair, and handle the tools well enough that when the camera rolled, the audience would believe these women really made their living that way. It may sound like a small thing, but it mattered a lot. A movie like Steel Magnolias depends on everyday detail. If the salon looked fake, the whole atmosphere of the film would feel fake too. As a result, when you watch the movie, neither Truvi nor Anel feels like an actress pretending to be a hairdresser. They feel like women who have been working in that salon for years, who know what their regulars like, and who understand exactly how that space operates. Number 13. One complaint at dinner. Led to soap dish. During filming in Louisiana, the cast often spent time together off-set because the small town did not offer a lot of entertainment. They would eat, talk, and slowly become very close. During one of those gatherings, Robert Harling asked everyone what kind of role they most wanted to play next. Sally Field answered immediately. She wanted to play a woman who was mean, a little nasty, but got to wear beautiful clothes. She was tired of playing decent women who always had to appear in unflattering outfits. Harling remembered that. And 2 years later, he wrote Soap Dish, almost exactly in response to that wish. This is such a fun fact, because it shows that Steel Magnolias did not just leave behind tears. It also created a working environment close enough that actors could honestly say what they wanted, and a writer who listened closely enough to turn that into another movie. Number 14. Bette Davis personally called and asked for the role of Weezer. One especially memorable detail is that the legendary Bette Davis personally reached out to Robert Harling after seeing the stage version of Steel Magnolias. She very much wanted to play Weezer. According to Harling, she invited him to tea and nearly launched straight into casting the entire film herself. This is not just a fun anecdote. It also shows how attractive the roles in Steel Magnolias were to major actors. On the surface, Weezer is an older woman with a sharp tongue and a bad attitude, but in reality, it is a terrific role. Funny, sharp, distinctive, and capable of stealing every scene if played the right way. In the end, Bette Davis did not get the part. Shirley MacLaine did, and she was excellent. But the fact is still wonderful because it shows that even early on, this story was seen as rich ground for performance, not just as another emotional women's film. Number 15. The film succeeded because it stayed true to the story's core values. Before it became a movie, Steel Magnolias was already a successful off-Broadway play. That is extremely important. A lot of adaptations fail because they try too hard to open up the story and make it feel more cinematic. Steel Magnolias did not make that mistake. It succeeded because it understood that its greatest strength was not large scenes or emotional spectacle. Its power was in the dialogue and the relationships. The play proved early on that if you simply put a group of women together, let them argue, tease, gossip, and then suddenly say something that makes the whole room go quiet, audiences would still be completely drawn in. The movie kept that exact spirit. It did not destroy the theatrical heart of the story. It simply opened it up a little more with Louisiana locations and the faces of the cast. By this point, the movie becomes easier to understand. It did not win because of one single detail. It won because it had a strong foundation from the start. From the original story, the dialogue, the cast, and the way the filmmakers paid attention to the smallest details. Number 16. Steel Magnolias was not just a pretty title. The title sounds soft and graceful, but it actually describes the women in the story perfectly. Magnolia suggests beauty, gentleness, femininity, and southern charm. Steel means strength, durability, and the ability to take pressure. By putting those two words together, Robert Harling described exactly the kind of women he grew up around. They might dress beautifully, laugh easily, speak softly, and even seem delicate. But when crisis comes, they are the ones who endure, carry each other forward, and keep the group from falling apart completely. That is what the film shows over and over. A soft exterior does not mean a weak interior. In fact, sometimes the people who seem the softest are the ones who are strongest. It is a small fact, but an important one, because it explains why this movie is not just about women being charming in a beauty shop. It is about endurance. Number 17. Julia Roberts almost stepped straight into stardom. When Steel Magnolias began filming, Julia Roberts was still not the biggest name in the cast. She was very young, not especially experienced, and standing beside her was a group of seasoned stars: Sally Field, Shirley MacLaine, Olympia Dukakis, Dolly Parton, and Daryl Hannah. In a project like that, a young actress can disappear very easily. But the opposite happened. Shelby made Julia Roberts stand out in a very clear way. She did not play the character as a girl who only existed to be pitied. She made Shelby lively, stubborn, lovable, energetic, and unforgettable. That is what mattered most. Because when tragedy hits Shelby, the audience is not just sad because the story is sad. They are sad because they have genuinely come to love her. That is why the role became such a major turning point in Roberts' career. Steel Magnolias earned her her first Oscar nomination. And even more importantly, it made Hollywood realize she was not just a pretty face or a bright smile. She had real screen presence. She could stand in the middle of an all-star cast and still be the person viewers remembered most. Only a few months later, Pretty Woman came out and turned Julia Roberts into a superstar. But if you look closely, Steel Magnolias is where that door first opened. This is the film that showed audiences she could make them laugh and break their hearts in the same performance. And when a young actor can do both of those things in one role, becoming a star is usually only a matter of time. Number 18. Natchitoches was not just a filming location. Robert Harling did not want Steel Magnolias shot in a town that merely looked vaguely southern for convenience. He wanted it filmed in Natchitoches, Louisiana, the place tied to his family, his childhood, and his memories of his sister. That was not a decorative choice. It was his way of keeping the story as close to real life as possible. And in the end, that decision proved absolutely right. Natchitoches did not just give the movie a beautiful backdrop. It gave the film a lived-in feeling. The streets, the church, the cemetery, the old houses, and the rhythm of the town all helped Steel Magnolias feel grounded in a way many emotional dramas do not. What matters even more is that after the film came out, Natchitoches did not let that story drift away. The town embraced the movie as part of its cultural history. Fans still travel there from all over to visit the filming locations. They go to the church where Shelby was married, the cemetery where the most painful scene takes place, and the streets that appeared on screen. That is a very special kind of legacy. Some films only survive on home video, on television, or in memory. Steel Magnolias is different. It also survives in a real place. And when audiences go to Natchitoches, they are not just visiting a shooting location. They are stepping into the space that helped keep this story alive for more than 3 decades. Number 19. You can actually stay overnight in Shelby's house. One of the things fans of Steel Magnolias love most is that the Eatonton family home still exists in real life, and not just as something to admire from the outside. The house has since become a bed and breakfast, which means guests can actually book a room and stay inside the very space that appeared in the film. That detail may sound small, but it says a lot about the movie's lasting power. Not every film has a location preserved well enough that fans still want to sleep there, take pictures, eat breakfast, and spend an entire weekend living inside the atmosphere of the story. With Steel Magnolias, that happens because audiences did not just watch the story and move on. They formed a connection to it. The house is in Natchitoches, and many people go there not just because it is beautiful. They go because it is tied to the Eatonton family on screen. It is the place where Shelby and her mother talked, where the family shared both joyful and painful moments. When fans walk into that house, they are not just seeing an old Southern home. They are stepping into a piece of their own movie memory. That helps explain why Steel Magnolias is still loved today. This is not the kind of movie audiences remember only because of one shocking scene or one famous line. It is the kind of story that makes people want to stay inside it just a little longer. And being able to sleep in Shelby's house is one very real way of doing exactly that. Number 20. The remake proved this story does not belong to only one era. In 2012, Lifetime produced a remake of Steel Magnolias with an all-black cast. Queen Latifah played Malin, Jill Scott played Truvy, Alfre Woodard played Weezer, Felicia Rashad played Clary, and Condola Rashad played Shelby. As soon as the project was announced, audience reaction was mixed. A lot of people were skeptical because the 1989 film was already so beloved. Remaking a story that popular is always risky. But the remake ended up proving something very important. The strength of Steel Magnolias does not come from it being a movie no one should ever touch. Its real strength is the story itself. If the story is strong enough, honest enough, and emotionally true enough, it can still work with a new cast, a new setting, and a new moment in time. The 2012 version drew very strong ratings for Lifetime. That showed there was still a real audience for this kind of story. People still wanted to watch women talk to each other, carry each other through hardship, and try to survive pain that is not easy to put into words. This is not some outdated formula. It is an emotional structure that still works. And that is exactly why Steel Magnolias stands apart. It is not just a film tied to one all-star cast from 1989. It is a story strong enough to keep living across generations. The remake does not replace the original, but it proves the core of Steel Magnolias still holds its power. The bond between mother and daughter, the friendship between women, and the way people help each other stay standing when tragedy hits. Steel Magnolias is not just a movie that makes audiences laugh and then cry. It is a story written out of real loss, kept alive through memory, and told through women who are far softer on the surface than the strength they carry underneath. Maybe that is why, after all these years, the film still carries the same emotional weight. Out of all these secrets, which detail moved you the most? Leave a comment below, and if you want me to keep uncovering the behind-the-scenes stories of other classic films, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the bell.